The man appeared beside the road before Claire ever touched the stones, silent, motionless, as if he had been waiting. For centuries, Scotland welcomed them with rain. Not the kind that crashes down in sudden storms and disappears an hour later, but the fine cold rain that hangs in the air like a memory. The road shimmered beneath the headlights, the mountains faded into mist, and the wind moved through the yellow grass across the hills as if invisible hands were brushing over the land. Claire sat quietly beside the car window. Frank drove carefully along the narrow Highland road, occasionally glancing at her with the same gentle smile she had once loved more than anything. After the war, they were trying to become husband and wife again, trying to remember who they had been before the world changed. But war changes people forever, sometimes so deeply that they can never truly return. "You're thinking again," Frank said softly. Claire smiled faintly. "Just looking." "At what?" She turned toward the window. "I don't know. It feels like these hills remember something." The car climbed slowly through the highlands. Heavy clouds drifted above the distant peaks. Old stone fences vanished into the fog, and the scattered trees looked ancient, as though they had stood there for centuries, watching the rise and fall of forgotten lives. Frank chuckled quietly. Scotland does know how to impress people. But Claire didn't answer, because in that moment, through the drifting mist, she thought she saw someone standing on the hill above the road. A man, tall, perfectly still. She turned sharply to look back. Nothing, only fog and rain. At this moment in the video, the music becomes softer, slower, almost whispering. Claire placed her hand against the cold glass. Suddenly, without explanation, fear crept into her chest, as though the road ahead was leading them somewhere far beyond a simple vacation. They stopped for the night at a small inn outside Inverness. The old building stood among dark trees, its wooden sign creaking in the wind. Inside, the air smelled of smoke, old books, and dried herbs. The innkeeper, an elderly woman with silver hair, stared at Claire for a long moment, as though she recognized her. And that was strange, because they had never met before. "Long journey?" the woman asked quietly. "Yes," Frank answered. "We came here to rest for a while." The old woman nodded slowly, but her eyes remained fixed on Claire. "Sometimes," she whispered, "the road chooses the traveler." Frank laughed politely. "That sounds like the beginning of an old ghost story." But the woman didn't smile. And at that exact moment, the lights outside flickered, only for a second. Yet Claire saw him again. The same tall figure standing beside the road beneath rain, watching the wind, watching her. Claire rose from her chair immediately. "Did you see him?" "See who?" Frank asked. She hurried towards the window. No one was there, only the empty road, the fog, and the swaying lanterns outside. The next morning, they continued deeper into the highlands. Frank wanted to show Claire the ancient standing stones locals had spoken about. Craig na Dun. The road became narrower as they climbed higher into the hills. Gravel crackled beneath the tires, and the wind grew stronger with every mile. And the closer they came to the stones, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects, nothing. Only the sound of their engine and the breathing of the wind. Frank stopped the car beside an old stone marker. Claire stepped outside and instantly felt the cold. Not ordinary cold, something older. As if the air itself belonged to another century. Beautiful, isn't it? Frank asked. But Claire wasn't listening. She was staring towards the top of the hill. The man stood there again, closer this time. She could see the dark coat moving in the wind, the wet strands of hair against his face, and the stillness in his posture. And somehow, it felt as though he had been waiting for her. Frank followed her gaze. What is it? There's someone up there. But when Frank looked toward the hill, it was empty. They climbed to the stones near sunset. The ancient circle rose from the hill like the remains of another world, massive grey stones covered in moss, silent, timeless. And the wind around them sounded different, lower, almost like a distant hum. Claire moved closer slowly. She felt something strange pulling her forward, as though her heartbeat had begun to match the rhythm of the stones themselves. Meanwhile, Frank walked nearby, taking photographs and talking about old Highland clans, but his voice sounded farther away with every passing second, as though an invisible distance had appeared between them. Claire touched one of the stones, and suddenly the world went silent, completely silent. Even the wind disappeared. Only a low vibration remained, growing louder like the sound of a massive bell echoing deep beneath earth. She pulled her hand away sharply, and for one impossible second, she saw another world. Not their car, but horses. Wooden wagons, men in old tartans moving through the mist. Then it vanished. Frank approached her carefully. You look pale. I thought I saw... But she stopped speaking, because she had no words for what she had seen. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Rain struck the windows of the inn, while an old clock downstairs slowly counted the passing hours. Then, she heard footsteps outside. She moved toward the window. The man stood beneath the rain again, closer than before, tall, motionless, wearing clothes from another century, and he was staring directly at her. Cold rushed through her body. Claire woke Frank immediately. But when they both looked outside, the figure was gone. Frank frowned, probably one of the locals. But Claire knew better. No, this was something else, something impossible. The next morning she returned to the stones alone. The sky hung low and grey above the hills while mist rolled slowly across the ground. Everything felt unnaturally quiet. Claire climbed the hill until the standing stones appeared through the fog once more. And suddenly the wind stopped. Completely. Then she heard the hum again, louder now. The stones almost seemed alive. She stepped toward the central stone and placed her hand against its cold surface. A voice whispered beside her ear, a man's voice. Soft, distant. Claire. She opened her eyes sharply. The stranger stood before her. Now she could finally see his face. Unfamiliar, and yet strangely familiar at the same time. He looked at her as though he had spent years searching for her. The wind exploded around the stones. The sky darkened. The stone beneath her hand began to vibrate. And the man whispered, "You're 200 years too late." A deafening sound split the air like thunder. The screen fades to black. The music stops, and only the wind of Scotland remains somewhere far away among the ancient hills.
Thank you for listening to my story to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Watch it to the end and see the finished painting, which I also painted.